I just found out that supposedly the big party that's taking place over in Paris it's kind of interesting because for those people who are not familiar with this issue, the United Nations puts on a big party every year. This is the 21st year that they've done this. And it goes back to the Kyoto Treaty and the fact that through the United Nations, they've been trying to develop some type of a thing where talking about global warming is coming, it's going to be the end of the world. And so I can remember way back, I was chairing a subcommittee that had jurisdiction over this type of an area back when it first started. We might remember when Bush and Al Gore came back, where they developed this thing called the Kyoto Treaty, and they signed it on behalf of the United States, but they never submitted it to be confirmed by the Senate. Obviously, that's something that has to happen. Well, they now are going to get in there to do a climate agreement. And there was a real shocker on November the 11th when the Secretary of State, John Kerry, made the statement, a public statement, that the United States would not be a part of anything that's binding on the United States. Well, the President of France didn't know that. He went into shock. He said the Secretary must have been confused. So they had to reconcile themselves at that time. That was 2 weeks before people arrived for the big party in Paris. And so they decided, well, we'll put together something where we can have an understanding of what we want to do in the future. Nothing binding. So the reason I'm mentioning this now is that there's supposed to be this afternoon a plan that's going to be unveiled that's going to reflect what they want everybody to do with this thing. Now, I want to keep one thing in mind. These events that they have, the last one I went to was in Copenhagen. They are designed to try to get 192 countries to agree that the world is coming to an end, and we're going to have to do something about cap and trade, very expensive to stop global warming. Well, anyway, this has been going on for a long time, and this one, the significant problems that remain, negotiators can't agree on whether it's binding or what part of the agreement might be binding and still comply with our laws and constitutional restrictions. They can't agree on financing. This morning, in order to entice developing countries, Secretary Kerry, on behalf of the President, announced that the United States would contribute another $800 million a year to help developing countries adapt to the effects of climate change. Now, let's keep in mind, that's in addition to the $3 billion that the President expects Congress to appropriate to this cause. Yesterday in Paris, the EPA Administrator, Gina McCarthy, again misrepresented to the international community the EPA's authority and confidence in the U.S. commitments. The highlight of her remarks was her claim, quote, the Clean Power Plan will stick and is here to stay. When attending international delegates asked questions about their legal vulnerability, making such a statement and the possibility of the future administration changing anything that is adopted by this administration, she reportedly walked around the question, and many in the audience were upset that she wouldn't answer the question. And the reason she wouldn't is because there's no answer to it. Yeah, I chair the committee called the Environment and Public Works Committee. We have the jurisdiction over these things. We actually, when the President came out with this Clean Power Plan, we said, all right, you're saying that you're committing the United States to a 28% reduction in CO2 emissions by 2025. Now, how are you going to get there? Well, they wouldn't say. No one to this date has talked about how they're going to do it. So we said, let's have a hearing. We're the Committee of Jurisdiction. And the Committee of Jurisdiction can do, what I don't recall any time a bureaucracy that's in a committee's jurisdiction refusing to testify, but they did refuse to testify. Well, I think we all know why. We know that there is no way of coming up with that type of a commitment. But if you're going to have all these costs and what it's going to cost us, does it address climate change? The Clean Power Plan will have no impact on the environment. It would reduce CO2 emissions by less than 0.2%. would reduce the rise of global temperatures by less than 1/100th of a degree Fahrenheit, and would reduce the sea level rise by the thickness of 2 sheets of paper. In fact, the EPA has testified before the Environmental Committee, the committee that I chair, that the Clean Power Plan is more about sending a signal that we are serious about addressing climate change than it is about clearing up pollution. The Justice Department requested that the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals not rule on the Clean Power Plan and the principle of domestic policy, which supports our commitments to the climate conference, until after the conference concludes. And what they did, they went to the courts, knowing that the courts were going to be acting on this power plan and probably acting against it, and they didn't want that to happen before the party in France. And I think it's the biggest signal to the international community. The administration lacks the confidence in their own rules. Well, Administrator McCarthy also claimed that the next administration cannot simply undo the Clean Power Plan because of the extensive comment period supporting the rule. The international community is not fooled by this either. The Congress disagrees. Not only can Congress withhold funding, any element of an agreement which the administration refused to send to Congress for approval, but the Congress has explicitly rejected the Clean Power Plan in a bipartisan Congressional Review Act that is saying that we do not agree with this and we want to do away with this Clean Power Plan before it's finalized. So that should be the signal to the people that are over there at the party in Paris, and I think that a lot of them do understand that. Now, even the president is now conceding, and we're talking about President Obama, that specific targets each country is setting to reduce greenhouse gas emissions may not have the force of treaties. He is hoping that 5 years or some type of periodic reviews of those countries would be in the form of a binding commitment. But even if that's the case, that would just merely be a review. And although the European Union and 107 developing countries are hoping for a legally binding long-term deal with review mechanisms and billions of dollars, any truly binding agreement must be sent to the United States Senate for approval. You remember back to get this sentiment that hasn't changed on the floor of the Senate. Back when they first went down on the Kyoto Treaty, we had the Byrd-Hagel rule. The Byrd-Hagel rule said that we're not going to ratify any treaty if it either is bad on our economy or doesn't apply to countries like China, so they have to do the same thing that we're doing. And that passed 95-0. And that was way back at the turn of the century. So, everyone knows that he can't unilaterally do these things, even though he tries. In 1992, when the Senate approved the President George H.W. Bush's agreement to have the United States participate in the Conference of Parties, that's the one that we just now is going on right now, the 21st one. The process, any emissions targets and requirements are going to have to be approved by the Senate. Now, this is the president that was in charge at that time, George H.W. Bush. That was an agreement in 1992, and that agreement hasn't changed. Legally binding agreements must go before the Senate for consideration, and there is no way around it. This is the message I conveyed when I attended the COP convention in 2009 in Copenhagen, and nothing's changed since that time. So nothing is happening over there now. They're having a good time. And I'm sure there's lots to drink and lots to eat, but that party will be over. I have to share one experience that I had. I've been pretty active in Africa for a number of years. There was an office holder in this tiny country in West Africa of Benin. And I saw him at the COP convention, or the convention that was down in Copenhagen. I said, "What are you doing here? You're not, you don't believe all this stuff." And they said, "No, but they're passing out hundreds of billions of dollars, and we want to get some of ours. And besides that, this is the biggest party of the year. So enjoy your party over there. Nothing's going to happen, and nothing binding is going to take place on this issue." With that, I'll yield the floor.